As I was just sitting here listening to Jason's introduction, I was reading this National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and I thought what was very telling is this sentence here. It was created to inspire all people to preserve, protect, and promote our nationwide network of marine sanctuaries. And I presume that's why you're all in the room. And I'd just like to have a show of hands. How many of you here are federal employees? My Sea Grant fellow raises her hand. So about half of you. And I was a staffer many years ago, back in before I got into elected politics. And I remember the role of the staff essentially was to help the legislators. And I have to remind people all the time what it is that we do. Why am I different than the rest of the panelists? I'm elected to be here to make laws, to approve the budget, to appropriate money, and to do oversight. So essentially, we are the Board of Governors. The United States Congress is the Board of Governors for the executive branch, and the President is the Chief Operating Officer of the United States. But he has to follow the laws that we make, and has to deal with the amount of money we give them. And what I have been struck by since I've been in Congress is how much this city is dominated by essentially the procurement, Wall Street procurement of material, mostly demonstrated in the Defense Department. That's where the big money is spent. Yes, the labor force, men and women in uniform, are really important to carrying out the mission, and the training for that mission is very expensive. But the real big money is in procurement. And when I look at NOAA, I see the same thing. It's the National Ocean and Atmosphere Administration. There's only one O in NOAA, and it stands for oceans. And a few years ago on the floor, when I said we ought to take the O out, because they're not really performing that function, we're just gonna call it NA. Because all the money, to this date, really big money is spent in the atmosphere. We're not sending people up there. NOAA's not doing that. That's satellite technology and computer technology. And here we are at this juncture with this incredible panelists and talent in this room on the verge of a huge disaster. A disaster that's got us because of the media looking at the details and sort of the blame game, the political strategy, when in reality what it tells us is that is our Sputnik. What did America do after it learned that the Russians had launched a Sputnik? We committed ourselves to a science agenda and committed ourselves to getting into space. We have got to recommit ourselves to getting into the ocean. And it's going to take equipment, yes, like we're spending in space, and it's going to take, where we can, because we can go there, it's going to take manpower. It's going to take people. And that's why you're in this room. Because what we don't have is any plan, any vision for that whole ocean. We're all in our own silos, and this town is full of everybody, including members of Congress, that are here to protect because they have an interest in those silos. And it's very difficult to get people organized to look at the big picture. And you've all been very supportive of my attempt to do the big picture. The BOP bill, the Big Ocean Bill, or otherwise called Oceans 21, was a way of trying to get national policy on the oceans, and then an implementation process. As Jane Lachenko said last night, we have done, after what we've learned from the other disasters, particularly Santa Barbara Channel blowout, and it was how to deal with sort of the setting up NOAA and setting up the National Marine Sanctuary System and Estuary System and so on. But we have not, and Coastal Zone Management System. And that system, because I'm from my background in our districts, and I've sat on the State Coastal Commission when I was a county supervisor, is really a good, smart plan. It's essentially what we talk about when we get into marine spatial planning. But we're here today to talk about what we could do on the energy curve. And it seems to me the energy curve is not, it's very simple. We just got to get off black oil and black coal. And yet those industries are huge in this town, and the legislators who represent them are doing the same thing I'm doing in representing the ocean. They're defending their interests. If you're from Pennsylvania and the coal mine of West Virginia, and you got some powerful people in Congress that are, there's the whole coal patch people that, defend that. And, we've just had coal miner disasters, and you saw how this nation rallied to the miners' union, and essentially looked at the workforce, and now we're gonna require a lot more mine safety. There's been a lot of pressure. George Miller, the head of the Labor Committee, has been pushing for years to upgrade mine safety. And now we've got the impetus to do it. But you have a very cultural and nostalgic viewpoint about coal mining in America. You also have a nostalgia for those people from the oil states, the oil patch. So the energy politics in Washington is really geographical. It depends on what goes on in your district. And there's a lot of history in that, and legislators in both the House and the Senate come here to protect those. And nothing stronger could be said than the senators from the Midwestern states, who essentially have created this commodities program where commodity crops, there's only 5 of them, wheat, corn, soybeans, cotton and rice, get a guaranteed payment if the market crashes or the market goes below a certain level. And the rest of agriculture doesn't get it. But those senators can control that, because from those states, that's their big economic issue. So what I'm suggesting that today and this week is with you all here is a time for call for action. And I'd first like to call for action of those of you that are working for the federal government, because you're the insiders. The rest of this room is here to petition us to do our job and to do it smart. And you can do a lot of work, because Congress does the big stuff. We adopt laws on the generic. And then we have rulemaking that is done by the bureaucrats, essentially writing the rules and having transparency. Those rules are what really runs the machinery of government and any operations. And I challenge you that there's opportunity for you who are working for the federal government in each of your capacities to look at your governance, at your silo, and figure out how can we do a better job, because the only way we're gonna get that done is through collaboration. Look, last night, there was a lot of people. That room was full. And it was done the night that the president asked the entire Congress to come to the White House for a picnic. And it's like the biggest day of the year, because you can take all your family and friends. And yet we filled that room. I felt there were more importance in that room last night than there was on the White House lawn yesterday. I mean, you had Captain David Walsh there. I was down at National Geographic Society when they gave him a medal. It was Explorer Medal. You realize that when the Explorers Club got together, Sylvia Earle told me the story. The questions went, how many people in the Explorers Club have been to Everest? And a lot of hands went up. How many explorers have been to the moon? About 3 or 4 hands went up. He says, how many explorers have been to the bottom of the ocean? Only 1 hand went up. And David Walsh is that person in Challenger Deep. But Challenger Deep was a military equipment, and essentially it was being developed so that as we were developing our submarine warfare, we could understand what the consequences of going deep were. You had Bob Ballard there last night. I mean, certainly the Titanic and what he did in discovering it is, all the movies and material written about that. And Sylvia Earle, who I think is the Sally Ride of the ocean. Actually, she was in the deep ocean before Sally Ride went into space, so maybe Sally Ride ought to be called the Sylvia Earle of space. But